Hi, I'm Richard Seitz, alongside Angel Green. Welcome to another edition of Iterations, a video blog from Allen Interactions. There's been a lot of stuff we've been reading on Twitter and on the internet and trying to find topics for discussion. And we had a little back and forth saying, what's the most important thing? We're trying to narrow down what would be the most important thing to describe or that was fundamental to an iterative development process. Yeah. And we couldn't come to a conclusion. So what we have decided to discuss today was the role of reviews. And it is very, very important. And if it's not the most important part of managing an iterative process, it certainly is one of the things that can either provide you the greatest success or the biggest failures. Yeah. So when we were talking about reviews, what are the few of the things that we brought up?
Well, the first thing is that you have to plan it in advance.
Absolutely.
It has to be an event. People have to set aside time on their calendar. You have to set the expectations for what is expected of them as they go through this course.
That's a lot of times, and I'll admit I'm guilty too, especially on projects that are quick turnarounds. They have a tendency to let's get us to the point that we're going to just now have a review.
Right.
But that's the development team and the design team working together. We know that in the next week or so we're going to have something, but there may be a reviewer out there that isn't participating, and they're going to need to put that on their calendar.
Right. And so sometimes if you have, let's say, an hour-long e-learning course, and it's a scenario-driven course, it's going to take that reviewer a long time to go through that course if they're going through each and every single one of the possible outcomes for all of the scenarios that are built in that course. So a 1-hour course could quickly turn into a 3-hour event in terms of review. And if you don't have that time booked on somebody's calendar, asking them for 3 hours at the spur of the hat is just not going to happen.
Well, I tell you, that's the biggest thing is that you ask a reviewer to participate and you give them a link to the course, and they may in their mind be thinking they're going to click through a page turner.
Right.
And if you have a really engaging, multi-step, scenario-driven interaction, there are a lot of different pathways to take through that, and they may realize that they can't discover all of them, or they have to go back and review all of them, and they're not going to be a happy reviewer in that case.
Right. So managing that expectation.
Managing expectation by planning in advance for the review. That's important.
Right.
I think the second thing we brought was pick the right reviewers.
Exactly.
And the answer, we know for a fact, anyone can be a good reviewer, but there's one way to describe what not to pick, and that's everyone. Not every review requires everyone to review it.
Right. So if you're talking about a 40-person review team, and now you're talking about 3 hours a reviewer, that's
Stop your whole company.
Yeah, that's
just to review your one course.
A lot of resources.
But the other thing is that's not happening once.
Right.
That could happen 3 and 4 times in a project at the design proof, at the alpha, the beta, and the gold.
Right.
And setting out that much time out of your organization for that many people may not be realistic. The other thing, too, with the reviewers is what do they have to offer? What stage are you having them review?
Right.
Maybe some prototypes you'll have people in early to talk about, I like where this is going, it's a good idea. But they may not come back in till later on, and more of a verification kind of role.
Right, and also some success has been had if you separate the reviewers into teams. So if there's a certain module or a certain section of the course that has to do with sales, then you can have somebody that's reviewing from a sales perspective. And if there's another portion of the course that has to do with process, you might have some of the process subject matter experts go through that portion of the course and limit the amount of review that's necessary.
And again, we're talking about reviewing an e-learning course, just to be specific. I mean, there may be some things in ILT that are reviewed and managed somewhat like this, but we're really talking about the impact of an e-learning course in this case.
Right.
And definitely, having the right people review the right parts of the course is a strategy. But certainly making sure that that person has something to offer, and not just burdening them with go through this. And you're talking about a certain part of it for the sales people or something like that. It's that setting that expectation with this person. What do we expect you to do? What do we want you to look at? And what and how do we want you to comment?
Well, yeah, and I think that's another important thing that we haven't really talked about, but should be included in this discussion is what types of comments are expected from reviewers at what phases. So in the alpha or early phases, they can be type of questions. Wouldn't it be important for us to explain this here? When you get to a beta review, it needs to be specific. Change this word. Swap out this image for something different. It needs to be very directive in the review.
It will naturally go that way, but it will certainly pop up that you'll have some contemplative type things. Well, wouldn't it be nice? It would be nice, but we're way down the line. We may need to move on beyond that. But that usually comes about by not setting clear expectation with your reviewers. So the third thing, which is very important, and that's managing the comments. Yeah. Now, here at Allen Interactions, we have a commenting tool that allows people to look at the e-learning and context specifically, make comments, and it collects into a database. Not everybody has that. No. But what everybody will have with the number of reviewers and the multiple reviews is a lot of comments.
Oh, gosh. Yes.
And they are the thing that will stump you the most in reviewing. What do you do with them? How do you work with them? Where do they go? What's the expectation? So that should be defined in advance as well. We're going to collect the comments one way, and then we're going to turn around and do something.
Right.
And so I like to refer to it as kind of two stages: aggregation of comments. I don't say that very well, and prioritization.
Right.
So we're going to collect all the comments together. And then there are going to be duplicates. If there's an obvious error on a certain screen, everyone's going to say that. So let's just delete all of them but the one that states it. And so we don't, there may be 9 comments about it, we get it down to 1. That's going to collapse the total amount of comments. Then we're going to have to prioritize them. Somebody somewhere, either, on the project teams, have to look at it and say, this one is more important because 2 people may be commenting completely opposite on a single screen or a single image.
Right. And they need to have that discussion all together and say, which one are we going to go with?
This image should be a truck. This image should be a boat. Someone's going to have to make a decision whether it's a truck or a boat. And certainly you would prioritize it that way.
Right. And important to say, stop commenting at a certain point because those comments will continue to add on if you don't say there is a hard deadline to get your
time
input.
Frame.
Yes. In by that date.
We want people to make a concerted effort on every review. But it's certainly at some point you're just going to have to stop and say, we've reviewed it enough. That we put our biggest effort in the beginning.
Right.
And we know that there's some of these things that are, it's not ever going to be perfect. We can't make it perfect by reviewing it more.
Right.
It just won't happen.
Right.
So those are 3 important things when it comes to reviewing. And managing reviews in an iterative process is very important. We thank you for your time today. And if you enjoyed this episode of Iterations or some of the previous ones, send a link to a friend or a colleague of yours. Thank you.
Bye-bye.